Chapter 7, Improving Profitability. Applying lessons from Rule 1. Know your cost of capital. Keep non-performing asset in check. Sweat your performing asset. Let us discuss the first rule at length. Rule 1 of good financial management. As per the first rule, you must never invest your money in any opportunity where you cannot generate a return which is at least equal to your cost of capital. The prerequisite to ensure that Rule 1 is not violated is knowledge about cost of capital. Every business person, entrepreneur, and key employees must be consistently aware of the cost of capital applicable to the organization so that everybody can then collectively strive to generate a return that justifies the cost. My experience, however, is that many are absolutely ignorant about their cost of capital. They are constantly engaged in trying to generate income. Now stop and think about this for a minute. Unless you know what your cost of capital is, how you can possibly know whether the returns you are so busy generating are sufficient or not? Unless you can earn in excess of your cost, your activity and effort will be futile. You would never lend your money on a return of 10% when your fund cost you more than 10%, provided you know what your funds are costing you. The truth is that most people are unaware of the cost of their capital. I have interacted with many thousands of highly placed and highly successful individuals. When I ask a group of assembled entrepreneurs in a training session, how many of you know what your cost of capital? Do you know how much your funds are costing you? Very few hands go up. I find this lack of knowledge about cost of funds very alarming. Perhaps you don't believe that the situation is quite as bad. Well, in that case, let me put the same question to you. You are aware of your cost of capital? If you are an entrepreneur or a CEO, and if you cannot answer this question immediately, if you start humming and hawing, there is cause of concern. Let us now understand how cost of capital can be calculated. Take a look at this balance sheet. Liability side, capital 300, reserves 200, 12% loan 400, creditors 100, and asset side, fixed asset 750, current asset 250, total is 1000. Looking at this balance sheet, can you tell how much its capital is costing this business? But first, before you work out the cost of capital, try to see if you can access how much the capital itself is. In case you are not able to do so immediately, please don't worry. When we do this exercise in my workshop, I invariably get a range of different answers made up of various combinations of the numbers that appear on the liability side of the balance sheet. In this balance sheet, and for the limited purpose of this discussion, 1000 must be considered as the capital. What is the logic of Rule 1? Rule 1 tells us that we must understand what the left hand side of the balance sheet costs us and strives to ensure that the right hand side earns as much as or more than that amount. We must therefore ascertain the cost of the entire source side, but the 1000 on the left hand side is composed of 4 items: capital, reserves, loans carrying interest at a rate of 12%, creditors. Before you read any further, stop for a minute to look back at the balance sheet and examine each of these figures and ask yourself which of these sources cost the organization. The first figure, capital, is owner's contribution. Owner, as opposed to lenders, are not assured any returns. Owners are risk bearer. If the organization makes losses, the owners do not get anything. However, since they carry the risks, of not getting returns and even losing their money. Their reward is that there are no limit to how much they can earn, subject to availability of profits. However, there is no compulsion on the organization to reward the owners. Therefore, it is often perceived that owners' money is free. Now, what about reserves? Reserve represent profit retained within the business even when an organization declares dividends. It is only a percentage of the share capital. No dividend is paid on reserves. So, can we assume that reserves are unavailable for the organization to use free to charge? The next item is loan. Everybody understands that loans have a cost. There is a stated commitment to pay a stipulates rate. The lender has also made it clear at the time of lending the money that the promised return will be due regardless of whether the organization makes a profit or loss. And the ensure compliance asset worth for more than the value of the loan have been assigned to the lender as security. In addition, if the lender is not paid, the organization will lose credibility and its future borrowing capacity may be jeopardized. It's clear that loan fund definitely carry a cost. Calculated at 12%, in this case it works out to 48. What about the last one, the creditors? This figure often represents the amount due to vendors for good purchase on credit. If you make a purchase worth say 100 payable, after a month the vendor expect to be paid the same 100 without any addition of interest on the amount. This makes creditors a free source of money. In this balance sheet, only loans of 400 have been taken at a cost of 12%, which works out to 48. The total source are 1000 and the cost is 48. So it appears that the average cost of capital is 4.8%. Anyone with a perception that the cost of capital is 4.8% might refuse an investment opportunity that brings a return of say 4% and grab another with the potential to earn 6 or 8 or 10% and feel satisfied that they are taking sound investment decision. However, this perception of cost of capital is flawed and can invite serious trouble. Let's take a closer look at all the source of capital and understand which of them has a cost. 1. Capital. Does owner's capital have a cost? Stop for a minute and think, why would anyone want to start a business? Business are started with the primary objective of making profit for the owner. If the lender has invested with the objective of earning money, so has the owner. And if the lender expects to earn 12% with all the assurance and security of asset to fall back on in case things don't work out, don't doesn't the owner for whose benefit the business is really being run and who carries all the risks of losses deserves a substantially higher return. The return that owners would expect will vary from situation to situation and person to person. But in my opinion, taking even the most pessimistic approach, it should be at least twice what the lender is charging. In this example, loan cost 12%, so let us consider the cost of owner's money to be 24%. Reserves. What about reserves? Reserves represent undistributed profit which have been located back into the business. If a business sheet has reserve as one of the items to the on the liabilities side, it means that the shareholders of the organizations have been deprived of dividends to that extent. Who is it that has deprived the shareholders of dividends? Who has taken the decision to distribute the profits among owners or retain them in the business. In a property concern, this would be the proprietor. In a partnership firm, it is the partners, and in a joint stock company, it is the shareholders via their elected representative, the directors. Now, the question to be answered is, how can the directors who were elected by the shareholders to protect their in- interns take a decision that goes against the interest of the shareholders? On what basis can the board tell its shareholders, we have made profit but we are not going to give them to you? It can only be done when the decision to give dividends to shareholders is in the interest of the shareholders, and the decision not to give them dividends is also in their interest. And the only way in which a decision not to give money to the shareholders can be in their interest is when the board of directors carries the conviction that, given the reinvestment opportunities available with the company, it is possible to earn higher returns for the shareholders by keeping the money within the company than it is for the shareholders to earn for themselves by taking the money out of the company. What I am trying to get at is, what whenever or an organization transfers profit to reserves, thereby depriving shareholders of dividends, it has also deprived them of the opportunity to earn the amount by reinvesting the dividends. The corporation is under a moral obligation to generate a return on the retained profit which is at least equal to the opportunity denied. Let us consider the opportunity cost of reserves to be 15%, even though there is a strong case to attribute the same cost to reserves as to share capital. Loans, in this case, loans carry a committed cost of 12%. Creditors, it is true that vendors do not charge interest when they are paid on the due date. However, as most business people will vouch, any creditor will readily offer a cash discount ranging from 1 to percent per month, and sometimes more, for payment received before the specified time. 1 to 2% discount per month work out to 12 to 24% at annum. The creditor can afford to give this discount because this interest had already been factored into the quotation given by the vendor for supply of goods on credit. For the purpose of the balance sheet we are discussing, let's assume an average cost of 18% per annum. And now let's take another look at our balance sheet and calculate the weighted average cost of capital. The weighted average cost of capital is actually 16.8% and not 4.8% as we had previously assumed. If source cost this organization 16.8%, then any investment is asset is insured in justice only if a return of not less than 16.8% per annum or profit not less than 168 on an investment in asset worth 1000 can be generated. Many entrepreneurs I met are either ignorant of their cost of capital or carry the impression that only loan funds carry a cost and thus arrive at a number similar to the 4.8% we earlier calculated, and when they get into financial trouble by taking on projects earning less than the actual cost of capital, they simply cannot figure out what went wrong. It is very important to remember that no source of capital is free, least of all the owner's contribution. Owner's contribution is not only not free, but if it is actually the most expensive source of money. It's not only outsiders who make this assumption, but very often owners themselves think that their money is free. I have known owners who While evaluating a project, look at income projections and claim this project can't afford borrowed resources. Let us use our own funds. If a project cannot afford borrowed money, it definitely does not deserve owner's money. Never forget their owner's money is far more expensive than borrowed fund. As you may have noticed, I have been saying investment in asset must generate a return equal to and preferably greater than the cost of capital. Why equal to? Shouldn't I be say assets must always generate a return greater than the cost of capital? Let me explain. What happens when the returns are equal to the cost of capital? In the balance sheet we are scrutinizing, we have calculated a cost of 16.8%. We arrive at this figure taking into account everybody's expectations of return, including a 24% return for the owners. When the organization generates a return equal to the cost, that is a return of 168. On an investment in total assets of 1000, all those who have provided resources earn what they are expecting to earn. But what happens when the returns are somewhat lower than the weighted average cost of capital? All the other stakeholders of the business, the employees, the vendors, the lenders, will be paid. The only one who will receive less than expectation is the owner. How ironical. The business was started with the primary motive of making profit for the owner, and the owner is the only one who is not getting the desired return. And what if the business earn in excess of the WACC? The employees, the lenders, the vendors will still get the same amount, but the owners will get a return higher than 24%. To have outperformed the owner's expectations is to have truly succeeded. Then will rule be satisfied. In the balance sheet we have been discussed the WACC is 16.8%. To satisfy rule I, the organization must ensure that the investment in asset generates a minimum return of 16.8%. The investment of 1000 in asset will be justified only if the returns are a minimum of 168. But hold on for a 1 minute. Do all assets generate income? No, they do not. If you make a list of all the assets a business typically possesses, land, building, equipment, vehicles, furniture, stock of raw materials, fitting and fixtures, and so on, you will find that it is possible to classify all assets into two types: performing assets and non-performing assets. So, considering that our assets are supposed to generate a return of 33.6%, which has to be achieved over two-thirds of this year, since for the remaining one-third they are not performing, the effective targeted annualized rate of return now goes up to 50.4%. If you are an entrepreneur or a business owner who is reading this and realizing these truths for the first time, I am sure you will not sleep tonight. This organization will now have to earn at the rate of 50% plus in order to meet every stakeholder's expectations. What I am trying to do through detailing and discussing matters in this way is to drive home and message that every organization must realize it does not possess any asset. No piece of equipment or motor car or laptop which does not have a corresponding liability, and there is no liability which does not have a cost. To quickly grasp the relationship between PAS and NPAS, let's take the analogy of a household with a family of 10 members and a monthly expenditures of 1000 of each member were to work and contribute an amount of 100 towards monthly expenses, the distribution would be fair. However, in a family of 10, if 5 members are NPAs, since they may be too young or too old or work and earn, and only 5 are PAS and PA will have to contribute 200. Whenever there are NPAs, the expectations from the PAS become that much higher. The higher the NPAs, the bigger the burden on the PAS to perform for themselves as well as for those who do not perform. All of your assets are performing assets, and if the cost of your sources is say 10%, your asset must generate a return of 10%. However, if half your assets are NPAs, the PAS must earn at 20%. If the PAS perform for 2/3 of the year, they must generate a return of 30%. All this is going to make you run faster and faster just to stay in the same place. Perhaps you will now see more sense in my mantra. Less is bad, more is worse. Less results in shortage and more in NPA. Holding inventory is necessary for a manufacturing organization, but inventory in excess of what is required is a non-performing asset. It may be the norm to extend credit to customers, but if the salesperson offers customers 45 days credit when with a little negotiation he or she could have managed to sell on 30 days credit, the excess of 15 days is non-performing cash in hand beyond what is necessary is a non-performing asset. Every investment in excess of the optimum level is non-performing. Never forget, less is bad, more is worse. If the liabilities or source of funds are composed of a higher proportion of cheap money and a lower proportion of expensive money, and if the usage side has a higher proportion of PAS as compared to NPS, the profitability of organization in such cases will be the highest. In the next chapter, let us discuss and understand rule 2 of good financial management and also learn how to read a balance sheet using that understanding. Quote, it sounds extraordinary, but it's a fact that balance sheet can make fascinating reading. Thank you.